What's up guys, Houndish here, and today Bungie have just concluded their third and final live stream revealing new content for the Into the Light update. And so today we get a look at the exotic missions that Bungie are bringing back as part of this update, and naturally with older missions returning, that does mean that we get some updated rewards. So that's pretty cool. Additionally though, they talk about a new challenge for PvE content, some new objectives and rewards in the game for this update, and they also give a preview of the PvP maps that'll feature as part of the PvP map pack, which is dropping in May. That is going to be free for all players, so it's kind of part of Into the Light, but almost separate at the same time, as it is dropping in the second half of the update overall. Either way, we're going to break all of it down in the video today. As always, I hope you find this video useful, and if you do, a rating below really does help us out on the channel. But without further delay, let's get into it. And so first off, during the stream, they showed off the returning exotic missions for Into the Light, and that consists of the Whisper mission on Io and the 0 Hour mission, and they're returning with craftable exotics. So probably for most people in the community, this was the best case scenario for returning weapons. We already did have sort of indications that Whisper may be coming back, and they talked briefly about creating the various missions in the first instance. They didn't show a tremendous amount of gameplay of either of the missions, but for Whisper, they talked about beefing up the number of combatants to fit the current sandbox power, and they also point out that the mission will launch differently from how it did back in the day. Of course, we don't have the IO destination, so there'll no longer be that sort of RNG component of actually being able to trigger the mission with the public event, if you remember that. They also say that Eris Morn will be the one to introduce us to the mission again, so there may be a slightly new sort of narrative component to that as well. Either way, in terms of the sandbox for the mission, they do say secrets, chests, and various other surprises have been moved around and introduced. And an example they give is the first secret chest when we first enter the mission has been completely moved. They also indicate that new guides may be needed for the activity, as things like the boss fight has actually changed. They do want to keep things secret as well, so their gameplay was very minimal, and mechanically we're going to have to sort of jump back in and figure it out all over again, so it'll be interesting to see how it's been changed up. We'll talk about the craftable exotics in a moment, but for 0 Hour, they say they wanted to keep that sort of time pressure element, so it is still a timed mission, and a normal run will now have a time limit of 40 minutes, with the Legend version having a 20-minute timer, and they say that the Legend version also has extra secrets. And I think those sort of time adjustments are partially because they've increased combatants once again, and they say not only are there more enemies, but they're also more difficult than they were back in the day. And they show off the first couple of encounters for the mission. Otherwise, they do go back into the room with Trevor, and if you've never played the mission, it's a shame that this is spoiled by Bungie's reveal, I suppose, but Trevor is a terrifying robot that absolutely bombs around this kind of maze. And if we can't avoid the robot, then we die. It's pretty much that simple, isn't it? They say the key cards in the mission have been replaced with a new kind of mechanic, as well as new boss mechanics. So they're not quite going to be the exact same as what they used to be, probably a little bit more difficult, with some new elements and secrets thrown in there as well. So that looks pretty cool, but a really big component naturally are the craftable exotics. So they talk about Whisper crafting initially. We can see we've got a whole bunch of barrels and magazines there, so we're going to be able to play around with the stats on Whisper quite a bit. They also say that it goes from 18 to 24 rounds in reserve, so it gets a bit of a buff on that front too. And the first trait slot will be able to get Mulligan, Field Prep, No Distractions, and Enlightened Action. So we'll be able to do some cool stuff with the weapon there. And otherwise, it's got Whisper Breathing here, and aiming the weapon without firing for a brief moment grants bonus range and precision damage while it remains zoomed. Not 100% sure how catalysts will work for this one, but next up they show the Outbreak Perfected, and once again barrel and magazine options will now be a thing via crafting. They also say that for this weapon in particular, there'll be a series of sort of quest pursuits that unlock some of the catalyst options and perks, as we've seen with other exotic missions, so we're going to get a pretty similar experience. And there is the perk Disease Vector, which increases nanite damage, and enemies that die with nanites attached to them generate additional nanites. But otherwise it will now get trade options of Outlaw, which remains on the weapon, but additionally Rapid Hit, Rewind Rounds, and Headseeker have been added in there as well. And the say for Outbreak Perfected, if you have the catalyst unlocked, it remains available, but if not, it can be earned. So if you've already got the catalyst, you can craft that onto the weapon immediately. And in terms of the rollout, Whisper of the Worm will be available at the launch of Into the Light, so we'll get that mission off the bat, and then 0 Hour will drop during May. Additionally on that front though, they've said that ships for both of the missions are replaced with new updated versions, so the 0 Hour one is inspired by Outbreak Perfected, and the new Whisper ship will be a variant of the old version, but it will be a totally different item, so For players that played it back in the day, if you've got the exotic ships, at least you'll have the OG variant, and there will be new ones available too. Kind of curious to see the 0-hour one, especially with the possibility that it could be similar to the Wrath of the Machine ship from back in the day, if you remember that one. I totally forget the name. Nano Phoenix? That was a very cool ship. So overall, pretty excited for this. I'm not 100% certain on legendary loot pools. Perhaps this is something Bungie will talk about soon. But the exotic component and the gameplay itself is pretty cool, so share your thoughts on that down below. They did actually have some other reveals during the live stream though, before we talk about PvP maps. And they've said there'll be a new PvE challenge called Pantheon. They don't give us a ton of details yet, but they call this a raid boss gauntlet, which will start on April 30th. They're going to provide more information about it in the TWID, but it will consist of a new weekly challenge with escalating difficulty and rewards, where as suggested, we're going to be fighting raid bosses. So that's going to be another sort of component of higher tier content, I guess. On top of that though, there will be a new title for Into the Light, which is called Brave, and it'll consist of Into the Light Triumphs. So a brand new title dropping with this update too. And additionally, they tease a new onboarding experience for brand new players. So this is going to allow new players to skip the New Light campaign entirely. It would also grant some of the New Light rewards and unlock subclasses and allow players to get straight into the Light update for free. Man, all these names are getting confusing. But basically, Bungie are going to enable new players to get into Destiny 2 much quicker, with the New Light onboarding component more or less replaced entirely, or skippable at least. And obviously Bungie want to get players in before the final shape drops. Couple of final things, some of them pretty major, but character customization or recustomization will drop with Into the Light as well. So that update that Bungie previewed a while back is going to be immediately available in April. Plus they say they'll add another Bungie name change token. So if you don't have a token to change your Bungie name at the moment, you'll have one, which is a bit of a random fact. But next week, before Into the Light drops, literally 30 minutes before, Bungie are going to have a final shape gameplay preview. So this is April 9th at 9:30 AM Pacific. And Bungie are going to show off brand new gameplay with dev insights for the expansion itself. So Bungie are going to get us all hyped before we head into the new update. They said this stream will feature another new emblem. They'll go into more detail about all of these things in the TWID this week. But yeah, April 9th is going to be yet another very busy day on the road to the final shape. So overall, I think the update's looking really positive, but not to skip over it, Bungie also speak about PvP maps. We didn't really see any actual PvP gameplay on the maps, but they showed cinematics and kind of a walkthrough. And they say the 3 new PvP maps focus primarily on 3v3 comp play. That's sort of the design objective, but they will be available for all playlists. Firstly, there is a new Europa map, which is called Eventide Labs. And they talk about this being a long-forgotten research outpost and refueling station for Aramis Ketch, which is pretty cool. Obviously, we've got Fallen Themes there, with Zone B in the largest sort of outdoor focal space, and then 2 entrances from the other zones, as well as 2 internal zones with much tighter hallways. It kind of reminds me of the Ketch map from D1. I can't remember the name of it, but there was one on a Ketch in the Reef, I think. In terms of scale and layout, it seems to be pretty similar to that. But there's also a new Neomuna map, which is a shopping/entertainment center for the exos of Neomuna. So you can get a wee run out of medals and pick up some groceries on the way out. There's this sort of large central atrium room with a pit in the middle with heavy spawn there as well. So that's going to be pretty chaotic, and there are loads of tightly packed lanes and narrow hallways once again. They say overall as well on these maps, they've focused on having special ammo available close to objectives on the map. The final map they showed though was the pyramid ship map called Dissonance, and this is a sort of Root of Nightmares/Darkness architecture themed map. We saw a bit less of the sort of objectives and layout of this one, but overall it does look quite chaotic, filled with artifacts collected by the Witness apparently. So we'll see how they play out when we actually get to jump in, but thematically I think they all look really cool and pretty tidy. And finally, some new real estate for the Crucible can't be a bad thing. So there we go guys, that is the overview of the reveal stream today. Even more to come next week in terms of reveals, this time for the expansion and the launch of Into the Light itself. So we've got Onslaught, the Brave Arsenal of returning weapons, that sort of new social hub with Lord Shaxx, and the loot system and the pools associated with all of that core Into the Light content. Also a new title there, the 2 returning exotic missions, Craftable Whisper and Outbreak Perfected, and then the PvP maps, which I should mention are dropping in May. Certainly more than I thought we were going to get as part of a free update right there. Bungie are showing their cards potentially. Looking forward to actually getting to check it out, but I'm hoping Bungie will continue on this sort of route into and beyond the final shape. And obviously they know how important that is for the success of the game moving forward. But for now, that's the preview that we have. So we'll jump in next week and see what we get. Give us your thoughts in the comment section. As always, if you've enjoyed the video and found it useful though, a rating really does help us out. But otherwise, cheers for tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.